In my 7 years at Temple University's Tyler School of Art, I have initiated an arts and community program through which I have created 2 cycles of interdisciplinary performance work with very different communities. Each multi-year cycle has necessitated finding different ways of working and developing roles for participating university and high school students, collaborating professional artists, elders and leaders from communities, and partnering organizations. The aesthetic and formal concepts for each project depend upon the constellation of constituencies and the issues I encounter in each community. When I arrived at the Art and Art Education Department at Temple's North Philadelphia campus in September 2000, I sought out the partnership of Art Sanctuary, an African-American community arts organization based at the historic Church of the Advocate adjacent to the university campus. The church, as we found by listening to people's stories and through research, was the epicenter of the civil rights and black power movements in the 1960s and 70s, and continues to be a center for social justice work in Philadelphia. As community youth began to hear the stories of their elders, your grandma was a Black Panther, they sat up straighter and began to listen differently. And so the North Cycle began with North Called Home in 2001 to 2002. Poet and social worker Tripita Mason, who has since become a primary collaborator, created narrative poems based on oral histories and community stories. One of the first oral histories we heard was that of Miss Hattie Williams, a neighborhood activist who we interviewed in her nursing home. In this poem, Tripita recounts the story of Miss Hattie's action to demand immediate repair of the huge potholes on Diamond Street, which city officials had been ignoring for too long.
She says, sometimes I can stir things up. Sometimes I sit and marinate, let the seasoning settle in.
The story became a scene in the production, performed by young people from the neighborhood, elders from the community, and members of the church. These performers also formed an advisory council for the project, reading drafts of the script and clarifying points of history. Students in Temple's digital media program created visual projections for the production. The following video, based on photographs from community members' family photo albums and historical visual research, brings to life a major victory in Philadelphia's civil rights history, the desegregation of Girard College in 1966, with Ms. Mason's poetry accompanied by the church's gospel choir and performance by the youth ensemble.
You were up in our face 24/7 with your hatred, building that wall around us each day. And we took you apart brick by brick, and we scaled your walls, and we entered, and we tumbled your facade, and we won some battles, and we learned your ways, Jericho, and we prepared to break down each and every wall you tried to put up.
Tyler Visual Arts students worked with young artists from the church to create this collage inspired by the victorious Girard College campaign, with images from the protesters on the left of the wall and the campus of the private boarding school on the right. The process of creating North Called Home included setting up a community learning project, where the high school and university students and collaborating artists studied the autobiography of Father Paul Washington, a Philadelphia civil rights leader and the pastor of the church during the 1960s and 70s. The high school students were struck by how Father Washington used the church as a literal sanctuary, where members of local gangs held peace conferences at the height of their warfare in the 1960s. This performance excerpt features Jeffrey Page's choreography, created in relation to the text written by Ms. Mason. These battles we are fighting with each other only distract us from the battles we should be fighting together. We could put down these weapons, we could embrace like brothers, but what would we do with our pain? What would we do with our pain? In the next year of the North Cycle, we engaged the youth ensemble, now called the North Stars, to look at the church's tradition of activist art, specifically the 14 murals that were created in the church by artists Richard Watson and Walter Edmonds in the mid-1970s. In choosing the murals as a theme for that year's work, we happened upon an issue that is at the heart of one of the church's challenges, building the congregation. The perception of some of the lay leaders is that the controversial murals kept away potential new members. We held a community forum on this issue, where Temple students met with church members, the minister, and the mural artists to explore the issues.
One of the ones that always disturbed me is the one in the back where the woman is there with her breasts exposed. I always feel, every time I go by that, I want to do like this.
Beautiful work. But
Because she looks so vulnerable.
But they don't belong in a church. I think they belong in an art gallery or...
When we have visitors to the Advocate, they are startled by the artwork and they don't return. When I come in here to worship, I have to position myself so that those are not visible to me because they're upsetting as far as my worship service.
They came in, saw those first murals over to the baptistry. They were absolutely blown away and were really quite not just offended, but frightened.
They were here. Next day, I get a call from somebody complaining about the murals. Said those murals are the reason why I'm afraid to drive through North Philadelphia.
We should keep them, but we should explain what they are about, and then I would be happy.
Tyler students and faculty were closely involved in all aspects of the production, including historical research, technical production, and costume design. The performance of North and Beyond included live feed video of the murals, an original music score created by local award-winning jazz composer Monette Sudler, text by Trapita Mason, and performance by the North Stars.
Africa, Sahara, Zambezi, Kilimanjaro, free. Africa, Victoria Falls, Diamond, free. Children of the world, rejoice in Africa. Children of the world, rejoice in Africa. In the beginning, we were free. We worked the land and we managed to see. In the beginning, we were Akan, Dogon, Yoruba, Egyptians. In the beginning, we were Bassa.
In the process of working with Art Sanctuary and the North Philadelphia neighborhood on the North Cycle, the ongoing issues of the university-community relationship were actively engaged by community members and Temple students and faculty. Some of the partnership difficulties had gathered around my relationship with Jeffrey Hart, the Art Sanctuary youth organizer, and at one point they came to a head. The structure of the partnership at that point was such that I was the decision maker about whether Jeffrey would continue on in the project, and yet he was the one who was rooted in the community. We struggled and persevered, and we have become close co-workers and friends since then, still with our differences. But here was a juncture where race and class issues and the consequent power differentials could have derailed the project significantly. Lorene Carey, director of Art Sanctuary, spoke about these partnership dynamics at the 2004 Imagining America conference.
I wanted to to underscore something that Billy said, which was when he shared the business about his relationship with Jeffrey and how pivotal that had been and that growth. I wanted to add something that he's probably too modest to put in, which is this. I mean, you talked about the process of transforming relationships around race and class. You talked about teaching that, but I wanted to testify to your commitment to it, which means that when we talked about it, you entertained the possibility, which very few folks do, of understanding that in order for things to change, things had to change. Right? So consequently, it means that the power relationship that existed before does not exist now. That means that it wasn't just that Jeff had a problem or Billy had a problem. It was that here's a relationship where two people who ought to be having equal input into this have a relationship instead where one person, as you said, has the power to decide whether somebody else is on or off. as the program has evolved, you no longer have that power. Can I tell you that that doesn't happen in this country very often?
As we geared up for the next year's production, we had begun to rework the structure of the partnership, as Ms. Carey mentions above. Art Sanctuary was becoming the lead producer, and the teaching artists from the Art Sanctuary staff would play larger roles in the development of the work. After receiving positive reviews in Philadelphia newspapers for our first two productions, word was getting out in the city about our partnership with Art Sanctuary. The newly opened National Constitution Center was planning an event commemorating the 50th anniversary of the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision, and they invited us to create a performance for this event. Developmentally for the project, we were ready to take on stories beyond the immediate neighborhood. Beginning with interviews with local civil rights leaders, the Temple students and North Stars learned about the neighborhood's tradition of activism around educational civil rights. Here, in interviews with Jamasia Cantu and Dr. Edward Robinson, the project participants learned about how police brutally attempted to crush a 1967 student protest. These stories and incidents found their way into the performance.
About 11 o'clock, when they saw children coming from north, south, east, and west, the children actually tied up Broad Street.
5,000 of them came down to 21st and Parkway. And here come big van loads of police in riot gear. These are kids. Qualified teachers that schools to go to, computers and art, it's about us. Respect your elders, know the rules, everyone good food.
My collaborators for Reflections in Brown had grown to a group of 6 professional artists with ties to the North Philadelphia community. They saw the Brown decision in the context of African education and culture and brought in a traditional African aesthetic.
It is time to clear a space to honor our elders, our ancestors, our Creator. And they are here with us today. They will put fire into our arms and legs so that we can dance our truth. They will lift our voices to the heavens so that we can sing our truth, form our fingers to shape art and visuals so that you can see the truth.
One of the new artists included Nnamdi Chukwuacha of the Twin Poets of Def Poetry Jam fame. This excerpt layers Nnamdi's poetry with North Star's choreography and documentary footage edited by Temple students.
My daughter deserves an equal education, just like your children, our children deserve to be taught. And if the local government doesn't provide justice, well then we'll go to the Supreme Court.
Inspired by the one-room schoolhouses of the pre-Brown South, Jenny Denway, a Tyler graduate student, created this installation, which included poetry and writing from the North Stars and Temple students, as well as historical photographs and texts. Siobhan Norris, an MFA student in dance, created this next piece, reflecting the tensions between school integration and her own identity as a Caribbean-American girl in the New York City public school system. The soundtrack is a montage of Temple student voices on how school integration and busing affected them as young people.
I've never felt completely comfortable, almost like a specimen. So what are you? Like I'm some kind of animal, almost like a specimen.
Reflections featured the poetry of North Star students. Myra Allen, one of the student poets, performed her piece, What We Demand, inspired by her study of the 10 demands of the 1967 Philadelphia high school student strike. This is one of the poems that helped Myra to win the award of Poet Laureate of the Philadelphia School District.
You ask us what we want? No way, you ask us what we demand. We demand a classroom with walls that will stand. We demand new shades and windows that sparkle when you're in the days. You ask us what we demand? We demand to be as high as Thurgood Marshall was in the Supreme Court. We demand to walk down halls just as proud as Ruby Bridges was when she walked up first day into school. You ask us what we demand? What would you demand if you were us, young, black, and intelligent, but not receiving the same education as others just because of the color of your skin? You ask us what we demand?
The North Cycle released initiative for other art sanctuary staff and members of the church community. Several times a year, busloads of tourists arrive at the Church of the Advocate, as our work was chosen to be part of the Greater Philadelphia Tourism and Marketing Corporation's Neighborhood Tourism Network. The North Stars and the artistic staff are featured and paid for these performances of excerpts of the North Cycle. The cook from the soup kitchen caters lunch for the visitors, and some of the North Stars have become docents, giving guided tours to the art and architecture of the church. As my role as artistic director drew to a close, I was invited to make a presentation about the project at the 2004 Imagining America conference at the University of Pennsylvania. I invited my collaborators from the community and the university to co-present with me. One of the implications of my community arts work is the shifting of understandings and conventions about how knowledge is generated, transmitted, and credited. Here, Reverend Isaac Miller, the minister of the church, shares some of his reflections about the project, with other comments by North Cycle participants.
I've been wrestling for a long time. What's the relationship of art to political struggle? You know what I mean? I really, somehow, and I can't articulate it, I think the collaboration between Tyler and Art Sanctuary with the great, wonderful energy and vision of the kids and the artists and so forth, answer for me to that question of the relationship between art and activism.
Sure, they learned stuff about our culture that I didn't even teach her as being an African American. You know, stuff that, you know, she came home and she was really excited about. And when I went and saw the production, I was excited about it.
Not only were students getting something, but the community was also invested in this. The church, their members. When we hold these sitting at the elders' feet, which is what we call it when we take the students in to meet with some of the community leaders, was important to these elders to be able to have the opportunity to tell their story.
I love these productions because of the fact not only did it give young people a chance to understand something about history, it gave all of us a chance to understand about the fact that we are involved in a place like North Central Philadelphia. We are involved as human beings that, you know, thanks be to God, have some kind of spark of decency in us and hopefully some kind of decent vision of what the world might be. We are involved in something that is not going to happen overnight.
And this art sanctuary has really propelled to be extraordinary in aspects I didn't even know she has.
It taught me to be comfortable with my own race and my own identity in a setting where I am one of very few people who are white, and I'm from Lancaster County, so I'm rural.
To me, Art Sanctuary is not like a program to me, it's like a family. Like, when we get together, we like brothers and sisters, like we depend on each other. The most thing I say about Art Sanctuary is the discipline.
And I spent probably 3 months of the first semester hating it. Just really, really hating it because I was so uncomfortable and I thought the kids hated me because I was white and I was coming in to teach them about their neighborhood, but I'd only lived there for 6 months in a dorm where there's a security guard.
Art Sanctuary now runs the North program on its own, and the North Stars Ensemble and yearly performances have become very much a part of the life of the community. North now has active alumni who return as performers and leaders for the younger students. Temple students have continued to participate in the project, mentoring North Star students on digital media skills. Building upon my ongoing relationship with Art Sanctuary, I have developed international community arts collaborations at the church and co-sponsored a conference there with other Temple faculty and Philadelphia community arts organizations. In its 3-year pilot program, the North Cycle was successful in planting a renewed tradition of community performance at the Church of the Advocate.